so we are now recording. Audio is on. Okay, so I'm going to share. All right, and really what I want to share is Mitch created the VM that I was talking about, right? So if we go to, you should be seeing the course website. And if we go to the link, I have added the VM. Here it is, VM Ubuntu 18.04. You click on download and start downloading it. So that will, that's going to be the VM that you can use for your term project. It already has LAMP. I should have written LAMP on it. I forgot, but I'll update it later. So it should have LAMP installed on it, which we've already talked about. And then so you can use it for your project. You can use it also to follow along in the class. Remember, next Tuesday, we will start looking at server-side scripting with Ph.D. Okay, so set up the VM. If there's any issues with the VM, please email me and copy Mitch Burke. And then, hopefully there won't be any problems. So that's just a sort of an announcement. And then this week, as you can see, today is March 4th. So we're going to go over jQuery UI, just wrap it up. And then you have a homework assignment related to that. And then next week, PHP. And then, of course, we have spring break coming up as well. So keep that in mind. All right, so now that's basically kind of the announcements. So let's go ahead and start doing some examples of jQuery. If you remember, the homework assignment just requests that you add more jQuery, in particular jQuery UI, to your website. So that means, I think the last time we met, the last time we talked about jQuery and jQuery UI, we talked about a date picker, right? So today, I'll just do a few examples, how things work, tab controls, etc. And then you guys can, can work on your assignment basically, or ask any questions that you have. So let me stop here. I'm going to go ahead and just create a file, just like I usually do. I'll go to the folder for the class, 362, jQuery UI, and we can just create a file, text document, call this whatever you like. So this will be, we've done the date picker. So let's do, a progress bar. All right, so let's start with that. So you can call this one progress bar. As I said, there's a lot of controls that you could implement. So there's a lot of controls. Let me share also. So I've created the file. But we're just going to look at some examples, and you should be able to take it from there. So now you should be seeing the code, the Notepad++. So I've created, this is progress bar, right? So it's blank currently. I'm just going to copy, pretty much what I have from the date picker. That way, I don't have to type up all the code. You can do the same. Right. So I'm just going to paste that in there, and then I'm going to get rid of this part as usual. So if you remember, if you want to be reminded of how jQuery UI works, remember the HTML page. We've got the head section, the body section, and in the body section currently I have a simple text box and a span for messages and things like that. So then we have in the head section, obviously, remember we need to have these three entries, the jQuery script link, we need to have the link for the style sheet for jQuery UI, and then the jQuery UI itself. So these are the ones that we were using last week, and they work for us. So today we're just going to continue, and as I said, we're going to do a simple progress bar. All right, so let's think about it. So a progress bar is basically, some control that appears on the page that kind of tells you what percentage you've completed, right? So it's like a scroll bar, or something that auto completes, that a bar basically that's filling up, kind of like if you remember the old Windows, right? And it's still today, right? It's just much faster now, where you had that thing and it was filling up and it was very slow. So now still have it, I guess. It's just really much faster. So then what do we need for this? The idea is that we're going to have a progress bar, and we're going to have maybe a button, okay? So we want to have a button and a progress bar. So for this, we're going to use, I'm going to leave these there. They're not hurting anything. So I'm going to create a div, right? And I'm going to say div ID, and I'm going to give it a name. So in this case, I'm going to call it just progress bar. So you can see where this is going. This is the object, the placeholder, if you want to call it that, where we're going to fit in this widget or control. Okay. So progress bar. Then you can specify some inline style in here. And you can play around with this later, but you can see we can specify a width, let's say 200 pixels, and then we can specify height, and we're going to say 15 pixels. Okay, so this is 200 by 15. Okay, so we can specify some dimensions for this span. Then just close the div, just like that. All right, so that's one element. Then let's just add, a few break lines here. Okay, kind of place it better. And then, of course, we need some kind of an input, like a button in this case. So let me do input type equal button. All right, and we're just going to say on click. Our only goal here is to do, look at the progress bar. So everything else, we're just going to keep simple. You can create a function, right? In this case, let's create a function called show progress. So show progress. And then, of course, let's give it some kind of a value to the button. So we can say also show progress. Show. Right, something like that. Let's close the button there. So here we have, kind of the static elements in the file itself, in the HTML file. Now let's go and, obviously we need a function. So let's go into the script part, and we're going to do function show progress. I'm going to select it there. Show progress. Open curly bracket, close curly bracket. Okay, and so we want to basically update the progress bar, but we also need to initialize the progress bar. So in this case, we just call the jQuery function. Okay, and we're going to just say simply, as you know, there's many ways of doing this, so we can just do function like that, and then curly brackets. So then we can move this down. Okay, and now we can specify what we want to do. So we want to basically set up the progress bar when the document is ready at the beginning. Okay, so then the first thing you would do is, of course, you want to grab that div, right? So we want to grab that div. Oops. So we're going to do that. By ID, so # and then progress bar, right? So that gives us access to it, and then we just convert the div into a progress bar. So we convert the div into a progress bar. You can see that there, right? We converted it. Now, usually what happens with this is that you can pass values. A progress bar does have values, right? So we can pass that information as a type of key value pair combination. So in this case, we're going to say, you know, that this takes a value and we're going to initialize the value to 0. So at least now this introduces the idea that we can actually update this, right? We can update this value. So let's go ahead. We don't have anything in show progress bar, but let's go ahead and run this and let's see if it's starting to look like a progress bar. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to open it with Firefox. Okay, and it's not showing anything. Let's see. Okay. So this is the text box, and this is the button that doesn't do anything. So the progress bar would be down here. Let me see. Progress bar. Progress bar. So that should have been initialized. Yes, I'm going to go back to the code. Oh, there it is. Do you guys see it now? Hold on. So I update. You see? Oh, sorry. Should be this one, right? You guys see it? That's the progress bar right there. So it is showing now. Okay. So let me go back to the code. Let me do a few things here. One of them is let me put some new lines here. Okay, that'll update that. And so now we can see the progress bar. So now that what we want to do is just make it work, right? So whenever we press the button, we just want it to change the progress bar. And this should be simple enough that all we have to do is create a, you know, some kind of an index, right? So we want some kind of an index, you know, equals 0, you know, something like that. And then in here, whenever we do progress bar, we're just going to increment a couple of times the index, and then we're going to update progress bar. So I'm going to, again, call the jQuery function in here, and I'm going to say, you know, progress bar once again, progress bar. And this time, as you might imagine, I just have to change the value. So I'm going to say progress bar, right? So I can say progress bar. And I'm going to change the value. So I'm going to call value. And I'm going to give it a new value. So I, basically. So every time I click on the button, I will be incremented, right? And then I should be able to see this work. So let's go ahead and try that. So I'm saving this. I'm going to go back to the website. Fresh, so you should be seeing the page. Now you can see that the progress bar kind of moved. And now look. You guys see that? Make sense, guys? So that's simple, right? So that's the control for a progress bar. And as you can see, these are pretty simple. They all have pretty much the same feel to it. You know, the same idea. You grab the element and then you update its values. And it creates this effect of a progress bar. So I know for the homework assignment, you're required to include a progress bar. So certainly this could be very helpful. All right, let me go back to the code. Yeah, I'm going to go back to the code. Just remember, I just started with the code from. I just started with the code from what we did before last week with the date picker. Okay, and that's it. I mean, that's a progress bar. So as you can see at this point, you know, a lot of this is very straightforward. That's why I'm not going to spend too much time on this topic. You know, basically just, you know, we're going to wrap it up today, and the rest you can do on your own. You know, you can certainly research it a little bit more. Okay. All right. So that is that's the progress bar. All right, so let's think about another one that we might want to do. The next one is a slider, right? A slider is not a progress bar. It's similar to a progress bar, but it's basically like if you wanted to add the values, right? So you want to say, oh yeah, the lab 3, that's a 70. Instead of typing, you could just grab a slider and then, you know, add the values. So I don't know where we actually, you know, do this. I think in when you enter, maybe on eBay, I would imagine you can do something like this when you place, you know, your bidding, right? You can always increase your bid, although I think you can just type things. But yeah, I'm sure there's places where you can do this one. So again, let's kind of think about it. So in this case, this one might be, we're going to look at it in as a more complicated thing. So let me create a new file. I'm going to call this file slider and then .htm. I'm going to open it. All right, and I'm going to share the screen so you should be seeing it now. Once again, you know, I'm just going to copy this time. I'll copy the entire progress bar, given that it'll be a little bit similar. So I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to go to slider here. All right. So what do I need for this one? So here, let's say, well, for sure, for now, I need a div, right? So I'm going to use the same idea of a div. This time around, though, I'm going to let's just call this one slider vertical, actually. So I'm going to call it slider vertical. Okay, and I'm also going to make it vertical here. So I'm going to take out the width, and I'm just going to do height equal to probably longer than this. So let's say 200 pixels. Okay, and so that's the slider. And then now, once again, we would go, I like to start from scratch here. So let's say, what do we need? So we need probably the first thing, we need to initialize. So we need to set up the slider when the document loads, right? So we want to do something like that. So similar approach, $, you know, the jQuery function. Then in here, we're going to do, you know, just function for ready. and then open parentheses, close parentheses, and the curly brackets. Okay, so that gives us basically where we can write our code. So now we have this, and now we're going to grab slider vertical. So I'm going to do dollar sign. Oops. And then in here, by ID, so slider vertical, there it is. So I have it now, and now I'm going to transform that div into a slider. So just slider, just like that. That's kind of the format of it. Okay. And we can, so that's basically the beginning. Now for this, we would then specify the parameters. In curly brackets, we provide basically, it's like a dictionary of key value pairs. So we can go in here and we can start thinking what we want. So one thing we want to specify is the orientation. So again, you should play with these values, try different configurations. But the orientation here would be vertical. Oops. And then, so that's one parameter. Then we want to specify the range. So we're going to say min 0, comma, max 100. It's great. Also, we can set up an initial value, for instance, 60, right? So 60 would be the initial value. And let's just see what happens here. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this code just to see if there's any errors. Save it. Now we can go open the file slider in the browser. Okay, and I'm going to share that screen. And you can see hopefully that there's the slider, right? You can see it here. The range is from 0 to 100, and it's somewhere around 60, and it moves, right? It currently moves. However, when we move it, we're not actually doing anything right now. Okay, we're not really doing anything. So we need to have some event, some action, right? That will, whenever we trigger an action, we have an event handler for it associated with this sliding movement. So that's the next part. So I'm going to switch back to the code, switch back to Notepad++. Okay, so now in here, we're going to say, well, whenever you take an action, that's called a slide. That's the action, right? So you slide. So then what do we do? Well, we can handle this with an anonymous function. So we can say function, just like that. And this will be basically the event handler that we want to define. Okay, so this is our event handler. So you can see then we can move it down here, right? And now we can say, well, what do you want to happen? So here, whenever we trigger the action, remember that all events, all actions, they do actually have an object associated with it, which we can call the event. So that's being passed. The actual moving the mouse, using the mouse to move the slider is the event. And then we can pass also the control itself, which would be the UI, right? So we can reference that way we can grab the object, check its state, and look at the current parameters. So then given this information, we can update something, right? So we're going to update something given the state of where we move the slider. So we need a place where we can display our data. Okay, so let's say that we're going to display the data. Let's create here. Let's call this, label, right? And so we're going to display, or amount. Let's call it amount something. So we're going to try to display the current value of the slider on the text box. Okay. So then we can go in here and grab it with the jQuery function again. Oops. And we can say, well, I'm going to grab it by ID, So it's called amount. So I have it now. I have my amount, and now I'm going to change its value to something, right? So we use the val function just like that. But now the question is, what do we change it to? Well, the slider itself has properties, right? It goes from 0 to 100. It was initially at 60, but whenever we move the slider, that object, knows where it is. So it knows if I move it down, it's like a 40. If I move it up, it might be like a 70 or whatever it is, depending on how much I moved it. So therefore, that is recorded in the object itself, which we are calling the UI. So then I can just say UI dot value. And hopefully that would allow us to capture, the correlated number. So let's see if this works. Let's try it out. So I'm going to save the the code. Now I'm going to switch back to the browser. I'm going to refresh the page. So hopefully it'll appear here in the text box. So there it is. You see that, guys? So I'm going to refresh it again. But when I move it, so if I move it all the way down, that's 0. Move it all the way up, that's 100. 84, 42, and so on. So this is still, please, when you do this in your assignment, give this default values somewhere. But I'll move a few of these just to make sure that they're working and that the calculations are different. But that's, that's pretty much it. So again, you can see these are pretty straightforward, and they have a similar logic. Does this make sense, guys? Any questions?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Let me go back to the code. All right, and you can see it there again. So that's kind of the approach. As I said, this is not very terribly complicated, and you can always from here figure out other things. There's a lot of other ones. There's autocomplete, right? You can do that one if you'd like. It's not required for the homework, but there is that. All right, so let's see. Now, on your homework assignment, you have to do, if I remember correctly, you have to do a tab control, I think. So let's think about that one. So a tab control is probably, I want to say a tab control. It's a div. Okay, so it's a little bit more complex, but I think it's a div, almost like. Right. So as you might imagine, it's just something called tabs. Okay. So I think let's try to do it. It should be fun. So let's see. Let's start with a div. So again, I'm just going to start a new file here. I'll call it tabs. Tabs HTML. Save it. I'm going to open this one in Notepad++ again. If you guys, there's a link in the chat about the link that you guys were missing. Okay. All right, so let's then try to do the tab. So if I share the screen, you should be looking at the Notepad++. I'm going to do the same thing, just copy, one of these slider, whatever. copy it. Copy. And then that way I don't have to type all of this. Okay. Now, again, we need to figure out the JavaScript part and also the static part. So in this case, we're going to use a div, right? So I'm going to create it. Let's see if this works. I'm going to create a div, and I'm going to call this one tabs, right? So that's going to be the ID. But this is a little bit more complex because it's got more information. So divs can contain data. Okay, so we started our div there. Now we need to have, now I'm not gonna do a full, I might just do a div with like 2 tabs, 3 at most. But let's see, I think the homework said something like, you need to have all the labs in one tab and all the quizzes in another one and all the exams in another one. So let's go with that assumption. So the first thing we want to have, so this is similar to when you do menus with CSS, right? You create a list, an unordered list with list items in it. And then that way those can be, like that becomes the menu, here would become the tab itself. And then we need to define within this tab, within this div, other divs with the specific information for each of the tabs. So let's think about that. So I'm going to create an unordered list here, right? Close it also. So unordered lists, first thing. Then I'm just going to do a few list items, maybe just 2. So we do that one. And then in here, I'm going to say, I'm going to put a anchor tag href, and the href will refer to another div that I'm going to define in here. So I'm going to say $, and now tabs 1. Okay, so that's the tab, that's another div that I need to define. And we're just going to put some text in here. I'm going to say labs, just like that. And then I'm going to close the anchor tab. All right, then I'm going to do this. You know, I guess since I can just copy paste, I'm going to do 3. Okay. This one like that. Oops. All right, so this is going to be tabs 2 and then tabs 3. There we go. So, and then let's just change these to be more meaningful. So this is going to be exams. And then this one is participation or something. Okay, so you have to adapt it to whatever your homework is. Now within here, we need to define, because each one of these tabs will contain information, you know, there's other things that need to happen. So in here, I'm just going to say div, I have a new div, ID, and this one is going to be called tabs 1. So I'm going to say tabs 1. So there it is. Okay, I'm going to close it, div, just like that. So now I have, you know, hopefully this is where I can put in all the static information that I need, right? So, you know, so what do you need to have in here? Well, let's think about it. You'll need to have right, so the homework here, you need to have dates associated according to the document that I'm reading here for the homework assignment. Obviously, the scores for the lab need to be here and everything, right? So all I'm going to do is I'm going to say, you know, I'm going to write labs in here. I'm just gonna write labs for now. I'm going to copy this one 2 more times because I have those 2 other tabs. I'm going to change the names. Labs 2 or tabs 2, sorry, and tabs 3. And then here I'm going to say, well, this one is exams. And this one is participation. just like that. Okay, so obviously this can have a lot more. This can have, you know, text boxes, buttons. This can have other divs. This can have, you know, divs that can become date pickers, that can become progress bars, sliders, etc. Right? Forms can be in there. So whatever you want, you know, could potentially be in there. But I leave that part. You know, I'm not solving the homework right now. I'm just showing you an example of how to do a tab. So now we have a basic structure here for a tab. So we all know what a tab should look like. So did I put this in the wrong place? Yeah, I did, right? You need to grab this. This should have been in the, I don't know why I wrote that there. This should have been in here, sorry. So in there. Okay, so remember we created the div tabs, and first we have this unordered list, kind of the menu that we have at the top, and then we have the links, and then it goes to each individual tab there. So let's see if this works. So let's try it out, see if there's no errors. So I'm going to save this, and now I'm going to generate that page tabs on the browser, Firefox. Okay. So it's not working. Let's think about it. So you can see this is what I have. So I have the, oh, I know why it's not working. I've only done the static part of it, right? So this is the static definition, right? The list, and then, so obviously I need to do the jQuery part, right? So I forgot to do that. So let's go back. So this was the static part. Now I need to, what would you have to do? You have to grab tabs and then convert it to a tabs widget or control. So then to do this, what we might want to try to do is in the query section here, we can take similar approach to what we've been doing on the ready, right? On the ready function, we create our anonymous function. The function there, open parentheses, curly brackets, just like that. And then now in here, we're going to specify, what we need to grab tabs. So we're going to grab it by ID. So double quotes, £. I think the name was just tabs, right? And then what would you intuitively hear? Probably just tabs, right? So that's really how jQuery UI works. So now that I've done this, hopefully it'll change. So let me go back. I saved it. And now let me go back to my browser. So you should be seeing the browser now. And if you refresh the page, hopefully then it'll look like a tab. So and there it is. Look at how nice that looks. So now let's see if it works. This is labs. If I click on exams, there you go. It shows exams. Click on participation. So you can see it's linking to the right div. And then, of course, what goes in those divs is whatever you want to go in those divs. Okay, that's exactly how it works. So that's a nice one to have. It looks presentable, basically. All right, so that's a good one. I really like how it looks. And that's one of the things that you have to do for your homework assignment. Are there any questions on this one, guys?
None for me.
All right, so let me go back to the code so you can take a look at it if you'd like. This part is super easy. I mean, pure deduction should allow you to do it. This one's a little bit more tricky, but always start with this and then start adding. Don't do all the tabs, just do a few, make sure they work, and then start adding the other ones, okay? So always get the functionality first and then, focus on the rest. Okay, so that's a lot of examples on jQuery UI. As you can see, we covered date picker last week. We covered Covered date picker. We covered sliding bars, progress bar, tabs. So those are a lot of pretty good ones. Up to the script. Oh yeah. All right. So I'm going to go back to the script part. You can see that there. It's pretty easy. You just grab, the ready function, right? The, get ready function, and then grab this. And then have the tabs, and then create the tabs object. All right. So that's tabs. And then that's pretty much it as far as jQuery UI for today. I mean, those are the only things. I think with these examples, you should be able to do the rest of the homework. Now, this will conclude, unless you have questions, specific questions about the homework itself, right? This will conclude the example sequence, if you will, of jQuery UI. So the next time around that we visit client-side coding, we're still going to be using JavaScript, of course, but we're also going to be looking at other some of the other tools that that are available. Okay, so we'll take a look at those in the coming weeks, and of course, we're going to just go back to pure JavaScript as well, just to see what else. Again, I just want you to know, if you're ever working on a project and they tell you have to look at this tool, well, at least you know where to start with it. Okay. So I've pretty much talked about everything. Ajax, which is an important, sometimes I get the question about Ajax. Ajax is a very important topic, that's used so that you don't have to refresh the page. It only updates little sections of your code. Ajax will be covered in ITS 462. Okay, so just be aware of that. 462 and 450 are the continuation of 362. All right. So I'm just looking at my notes here, and I believe we have covered every example of jQuery and jQuery UI. So now you guys should be ready to tackle the homework assignment. All right, so let's do that. Let's switch over to the Brightspace, and let's just read through the assignment again. So I'm going to switch to here. All right, and you should be seeing this document, the link here. So if we look at jQuery UI homework, that is due March 11th. So that is 1 week from today by 10 p.m. It'll stay open until Saturday. The homework is basically this link. So we'll read through it again. To understand how jQuery UI works, to learn to use jQuery UI client-side scripting, to learn to develop an appealing client-side application using jQuery. This lab is based upon one of the previous labs, 3 and 4. You're going to revise it so that jQuery and jQuery UI will be used now. You should use as much jQuery as possible, even though many tasks can be done with JavaScript alone. And again, this is just a practice, one of the ways that you can do things. Some of the requirements: find and use tabs, a tabs widget, to group assessments. I've already done that. I showed you pretty much how you can do it. That is, all labs should be included in a single tab, and all quizzes should be in another tab, and so on for all your assignments. There should be a place to display the total number of points and grade per tab, right? And then also a total one for the entire course grade. And, that's basically, that's left for you, your imagination and creativity. For each text box, also please provide a custom tooltip to inform the user what is expected to enter. Okay, so, like the range. So if, enter value from 0 to 25, something like that. That I leave for you guys to figure out. Number 3, the calculation of the total percentage points and grades should be done on the fly without using any buttons. Hopefully you've solved that from the previous jQuery, and I think I gave you that code, if I remember correctly, on KeyUp, right? Something like Then, of course, include a date picker to record dates for the assessments and provide the option of using a slider control to assign the grade. So what that means is just like the example I gave, right? I updated a text box. So I can either just enter the value in the text box or use the slider. Both would work. Keep in mind, please have defaults in there so I don't have to enter values. Don't leave text boxes empty. So either 0 or whatever you want it to be. Additionally, include a progress bar to indicate percentage of grades enter for a given semester. All right, so try to calculate that progress bar. So basically the idea is when you've entered nothing, it's 0, right? And then when you have all the values in there, it is, close to 100, complete, okay? So think about how you would do that. Also, once again, please use the cookie to store what was entered. Remember, you have to convert JSON objects to string and then back so you can save the data there. For that, you can have buttons for the control of the cookie. That's fine. And then remember, as always, have a separate CSS file for any styles you need, a separate JS file for JavaScript, and so on. You'll need to, an electronic lab report, Word document, and all your code files should be submitted. You can please only use zip, nothing else, and then you will submit those on Brightspace. Okay, and remember that I will be grading only with Mozilla Firefox, so disregard this. I am using Windows, but I won't use Internet Explorer. I'm using Mozilla. And that's it. That's the homework assignment. It's I've given you a lot of the code already, and you have a lot from the previous, so hopefully it should be something straightforward that you can do. All right, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording.